What's up, everybody? How you doing? It's Marshall Couture, also known as Plex in hip hop circles. Um, so uh, Today is day 30 of 100 days of making comics, and I did my half hour. I actually did probably, I don't know, an hour and a half more or less of writing. Even though to go by like word count, you wouldn't necessarily think it, I guess. I don't know. But working on Sophia the Conqueror, that story. This story is taking longer than some stories do. I guess because it's really important that I develop the characters in this for the whole story and everything. Also, something that's kind of weird or interesting, I guess, is that I'm noticing with these stories is and I think I might have mentioned this before, but I guess I'm going to talk about it again. These stories are not like what I would typically write exactly. I mean, they are, but they're, I guess, a little less than I would typically write. I don't know. I have all kinds of ideas, but when I tend to have ideas, they tend to be like they tend to be in some kind of fantasy or sci-fi world, something other than the normal everyday Earth, type of thing. And if it is Earth, there's a big twist to the way the world is and everything. Um, and even in these, that's true, but they're less that and more typical world stuff. Um, so it's kind of more rooted within this world, but with the twist, but the twist isn't as um it isn't as like big, or it's not as big a part as when I say twist, I just mean like adding a supernatural element or a fantasy element or something like that. Um, there's not as much of that in these stories, and it's kind of weird. um, I think I do that sometimes, even if I do come up with an idea for like a story I want to write. um, a lot of times I'll intentionally be like, it could be like a normal story, but I'll intentionally be like, okay, let me put this in a fantasy environment or a sci-fi environment or just some kind of odd environment that isn't just Earth or America or whatever. Um, just almost to like not have to deal with um, trying to make it realistic, if you know what I mean. It's almost like, okay, if it's in a fantasy world, it can be, I can kind of make up my own rules and I don't have to because I'll get stuck on details. I have a problem with that. Like sometimes I'll get stuck on details. Okay, well, if this is happening in this time period, then the cars have to look like this and this, it has to look like it fits within that period and stuff like that. Or, even just other small things like what do cars actually look like, or, just different things within in the world. What do buildings look like? And I feel like I have to be more close to accuracy because I don't know, I guess I feel like somebody's going to point it out and be like, that doesn't fit there, and I'll be like, I guess it's that whole fear of being counted a fraud or something. I guess I know it's common for everybody within art and in other all kinds of other disciplines. And industries and such. So, there might be a little bit of that in there, I guess. But also, I think I do that because I want to have the freedom to kind of create certain things, and again, I don't want to get hung up on details and stuff. So there's that. Also, until I started studying story as much as I have been lately, um, I thought about writing stories a little differently. Now, now, I'm focusing on things like theme and what the message is, which is basically the same thing. And I'm focusing on like not just, it would be easy for me to like do like something like, and I'm not trying to point him out as a bad thing, but like Savage Dragon with Eric Larson or something like that to me is like I could just go there. And that's pretty much how I dealt with Glyph, my character Glyph. His superpowers were like that his art came to life and he was a graffiti artist. And I would basically just introduce a new villain in each book in some way, shape, or form and kind of create a story between him needing to get into conflict somehow with the villain. And I love that. I think that's fun. That's kind of how a lot of old comics and stuff kind of went. You just new villain. What's the new villain this month? And how is Superman going to get out of this one or something? That type of thing. Which I really love that style of story. And I did it for my first three comics, and I plan to do it again. For sure. But there's not really much story to that. It's been told a million times. That's more for just kind of fun. Like I don't feel like I need to even put much thought into it if I just straight go at it like that. But, if I want there to be actually some depth to it and some real like feeling and having maybe a message and things like that, then I have to develop it beyond just straight up, you know, some plot driven action, which again I love, but I want it to be more in depth. That's one of the things like growing up reading comics. Um, and granted, the comics I grew up reading was either old, like the goofy old like Superman stories that my dad had, from when he was a kid, or it was like Image Comics stuff and the books that the Image creators did before they went to Image Comics. Because basically I followed creators more than I followed, storylines and characters. And I wanted to be a comic book artist, back then. Like I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a comic book artist. So, and it was because of those comics. So, but even then, I was like, I want to do it, but I want the stories to actually be good because those stories they were the best. um, they had interesting elements. They had characters that had interesting elements sometimes. Sometimes they were cookie cutter copies of, other properties. And I think they did that intentionally sometimes because obviously, they were kind of bucking the trend and stuff and kind of putting it in Marvel and DC's face and stuff like that. Um, but there wasn't much depth. They had cool ideas, like even Youngblood is an interesting idea on the surface of it, a superhero team that, you know, is kind of caught up in the whole reality TV, Hollywood celebrity type of thing, of being a superhero. but there's actually real things going on too at the same time. But the execution of that story was just like you barely even got that out of the story. It wasn't interesting. It was just superheroes and villains fighting, basically. And they weren't even that well developed. But it kind of looked cool if you like that kind of thing. Spawn, again, another really interesting character, when you on the surface of it. But I don't know, like it did try to dig deeper, but to me I wasn't like super inspired by the writing of it. Again, the art was what I was looking at a lot. And again, Savage Dragon, as much as I love Savage Dragon, same type of thing, So and all the other books, I mean, different books had different qualities to it. But anyway, so that's where I come from. And I always remember, like, I always thought the writing in comics was lacking. And granted, I hadn't read, Dark Knight back then. I hadn't read a lot of the books that kind of did have good writing. I never read the Daredevil, the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff. I guess I'm just talking about Frank Miller here, but one book I did read that did impress me with the writing and was interesting on a deeper level a little bit was Sin City. That one, I was like, okay, comic writing can be interesting, Um, but other than that, it was far and few between. And for some reason, I just never went and tried to figure out the classics. And I was just like, I guess this is just how comic writing is. But I knew it could be better. It could be more. I believed it, and I believed I was going to be the one to make that kind of happen, I guess. When you're a young, teenager, you think you're going to change the world. And I still kind of have that in me, but much more based in reality. And I have that ambition in me, but at the same time, I realize that there's just so much to it. In some ways, you got to be in the right place at the right time, you know, kind of like the image creators. But then they took a risk. If they didn't take that risk, they wouldn't have done what they did. That was a big risk too. And pretty amazing story, in my opinion, how the whole image thing came about. So I don't know. I'm inspired by that. That story is more interesting than their actual comics. um, the rise and fall. So, anyways, I kind of blabbing, but getting into that stuff. Like I said, I wanted better writing, but I didn't take the time to seek out better writing because there was better writing in comics. I just didn't read the right books. And the thing is like I always kind of thought, well, maybe DC is better writing, but I don't want to read their books because their art isn't as cool. To me, art trumped writing, and I was more into drawing than I was into figuring out the boring parts of writing, which now I think it's exciting. So, it's weird. You grow up, you learn. Even back then, I couldn't stand stuff like Kirby or anything that looked more on a classic level of the art. Now I just love that stuff. So tastes change, my taste matures, things like that. But so I'm writing these stories, and they do have fantastic elements to them. I think that was always an interesting thing with like Stephen King. He'd always base it, it's always a story about like a writer in Maine or something close to that. Like it's always somebody in Maine, and hey, he wrote what he knew, I guess. So that's cool. But there'd always be a supernatural element in some way, shape, or form. And Sometimes, a lot of times, it ended up being more on the horror side. Um, but sometimes it was just a supernatural element of some sort. And I'm not saying it has to be supernatural, you know, but I like even when it comes to like detective shows or like anything with like cops and like crime cases. Initially, I'm always like, I'm not into that. Like, it's been done so many times. But if there's a twist to it, then I'm into it. Like, what was it? Like Columbo, for example. There's the twist is like, he kind of acts like he's dumb and he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he finds a way to figure out, the case. So that's an interesting twist. Monk, that show Monk, he was like, he had issues like OCD issues and he didn't want to go outside really and things like that. But because he had those issues, it caused him to see details that other people didn't see. Interesting. That makes it interesting. I mean, Daredevil's a classic example, um, of that kind of thing. But I guess that's not really as much like crime detective work as crime vigilante type of thing or whatever. So, so yeah, there's got to be some kind of twist. So with these stories that I'm writing, there is, um, so far, there is some kind of twist that goes kind of more into the fantastical realm, but I still have to write within a pretty typical, normal American suburban or city environment. I'm not sure if it's suburbs or city yet still. Um, but you know, it's it's tough, like because even in this story, I don't know for sure if it's gonna pan out this way, but I think that all the 12 stories will not, I'm pretty much sure that all the 12 stories will not necessarily be taking place in the same, block of time. It'll be different blocks of time. But I don't want to be specific because I don't want to have to like, and this might sound lazy, but I don't want to have to do like research, to make things look like they come from a certain period. I mean, I don't mind doing a little research, but I don't want to be like strictly held, to a time period where somebody might be like, oh, well, yeah, you got that right, but you forgot about this, and that wouldn't be in that time. Or, I mean, that stuff, if even if I did do a time period piece, I could, I guess, ignore that stuff. But for some reason, it's still in the back of my brain. Like, I would want to make it look authentic and stuff. And, but also just like relationship stuff. Like, that's something that I never thought about when I was thinking about making comics, like I, the comics, like, even in action comics, like to me, I don't really want to see, like, if I flip through a comic and see like a ton of dialogue, I usually put it down. I like a fast pace in comics, and I like exciting and interesting visuals. Maybe it's not the greatest aesthetic, I don't know, but that's what I like. I don't want to spend like the whole time reading the page and forgetting to look at the pictures. I like the idea that, comics is a dance between pictures and that words. So I tend to write and I tend to write very sparse. Like I don't I want like even if I have like a long thing of dialogue, like today I went through and kind of edited some of my story and I kept taking stuff out, taking stuff out, taking stuff out because I want the dialogue to not be like a ton of it. I want it to be like quick and easy to read for the most part. But sometimes you do have to get into a little bit more, you know, you just need it, to develop the story, move the story along. So, but um I always I like the story to kind of have movement and not be like drawn out. Like even old time movies and stuff, like even though the length of those movies were around the same length as the movies, maybe even shorter, I don't know. Like the black and white movies and stuff, around the same length as the movies we have now. I mean, in general, it seemed like sometimes those movies just take forever. And I used to not like those kind of movies at all. Now I dig them because I'm really into like sci-fi, old horror, creature feature sci-fi type stuff, or just old good movies. I'm into it. Like I dig it. Um, but man, some it just seems like they take forever because there's so much dialogue. It's more talking than showing. I think that's the reason. Um, and the idea of like talking heads, I hate that kind of idea, but I feel like okay, maybe that's a challenge. Maybe I can write a talking head scene but make it like super exciting with like crazy like camera angles and dramatic effects and things like that. And I don't know. I mean, even in my comic here, I actually have it here. The last comic I did, Glyph Hiding in the Light, you know, the I'll show. I got to look through it. The dialogue is pretty sparse for the most part, but then like there's this part right here where the two characters are talking to Miss Sedgwick. Um, that's Glyph, and this is Stick Up Kid, and this is Miss Sedgwick, and she's like a new character in this book. And there's this whole thing where she kind of goes into like this poem or rap, but it's also like prophecy. And so what I did was I made her like an old B girl, like because this is all the whole comic is set in a hip hop world where it's called Bap City, and there's also eventually going to be Boom Town, so it's like boom bap, big hip hop thing. So there's this whole thing where she's telling the prophecy, and there's more words than I typically put, and I didn't do it as well as I would like to, but the whole idea was that I have her say the prophecy while she's doing like breakdance moves and stuff. And they're kind of surprised because she's like an old lady, like with a walker, but then she breaks out and starts doing hip hop moves. But I kind of did it, but it didn't. I think because I didn't have enough room, it didn't come out as good. But I made it have like a rhythm right here. This is and I tried to make it a little more visually interesting. Like things were happening. So like she's saying it, and they're being like surprised, like what the heck is she doing? And she's like dancing. Here you see her kind of doing a little dancing more, and then they're like, what the heck? And then she gets real close in his face when she makes her final prophecy point. And they're just like, what the heck did we just see? And then there's another point too where there's talking heads, but I made it like I used the whole like the idea that like Will Eisner would put out there where if you're gonna do something, make it visually interesting. It's like the strength of comics is not only in the it's not only in like the fact that there's words and pictures, but something that comics can do that other mediums can't do as well is you can design a page in interesting ways, and you can make the words kind of fall in like 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 the sound effects and stuff in the words. They can have different shapes, and they can be part of the environment, like the whole Will Eisner thing. But I was thinking about that when I designed this page. So it's like, okay, talking heads, but let's make it interesting. So I put, this is a new character, Limelight, who comes in. And so now they have to have a bunch of dialogue. So I was like, well, maybe I can do it interesting. So it's actually almost like a splash page or whatever. And but then there's like all the dialogue goes in between. So it's visually interesting. See, like, because if I just saw a talking head, if I was to look through a comic and I just saw the talking heads and it was like kind of boring scenes, I'd be like, not so interesting. But this makes me a little more interested. So I don't know, you know, I guess that I hope that makes sense. That's kind of what I mean is um I get I'm not so interested in like the nuances of dialogue, and I mean I am and I'm not. Like I mean, I'm thinking about it, like there are certain shows and movies that, the dialogue is one of the biggest draws and it's awesome and it's fun and it's interesting. One of those being Gilmore Girls. I love that show. My wife and I have watched it over and over and over. We've seen all the seasons like at least like 10 or 12 times together. She's probably seen it even more than I have. But when I first found out about that show, like her and her mom would be watching it, but I'd be like, "Oh, there's that girl show again, that girly show. I'm not interested in it." But they'd always be watching it, so I'd be around and I'd see some of it. And I noticed the dialogue, and I was like, "Oh, they do say some funny things." And then it was a funny joke. Like I would always say, "Oh, you guys watching Dialogue Girls again?" So because it's so dialogue heavy. And eventually that aspect of it drew me in so much that I was like, I love this show. It's so awesome. So if the dialogue is dynamic, it's interesting. But with comics, I want to also make it visually interesting. Another one example of that is any Quentin Tarantino movie. And he actually makes it visually interesting and the dialogue is super interesting. So, and the first example of that I saw was Pulp Fiction. Super awesome visually and the dialogue and everything. So I guess I'm learning how that works, but like I said, I always want to make that interesting. But just like real life stuff with like families and jobs and like I want to draw like superheroes with costumes and monsters and stuff, not that. So like even in the Attack of the Lizard Brain, like it's funny, like I'm making the titles. It's like I'm totally doing like the trick, like it's like I used to hate this when I saw this, but for some reason, because of nostalgia, now I'm doing it. Like, when you like pick up a comic book and like the cover is like super exciting and amazing, and then you open it up, especially old comic books, you open it up and it's like just, six squares and it's not as visually interesting. The art might not even be by the same person the cover was done by, and they'll tease something in there and it'll just be a small part, in the story. It's not even the most important part. So I'm like doing that purposefully, even though I kind of hated that as a kid, but I'm doing it as like a nostalgia thing. But hopefully I'm making it interesting enough so that it's not as jarring. I'm sure I'll make the visuals interesting because that's what I'm into. So even in the Attack of the Lizard Brain, you would coming to that story, you would think, okay, this is going to be like this crazy sci-fi thing, um, where there's this big lizard brain terrorizing people. It's not really that at all. In fact, the lizard brain, what when the monster of the lizard brain literally will probably only be seen in one panel in the whole story. But it is about an attack of the lizard brain because it's actually about a kid who is a bully and does a lot of name calling, and it's interesting. There will be other monsters in it too. It's like a twist, it's I don't know, I just thought it would be a fun thing. Same thing with Sophia the Conqueror. It's not, about a barbarian female, but it there is fantastic elements and there will be a lot of interesting visuals, but it's mostly in her imagination, and she's just a little girl trying to figure some stuff out. So it's like I think that's still interesting personally. So, but I have to do something to make it visually interesting, and I have to do something that makes it interesting for me, or else I can't just do like a straight, a kid goes to school and gets bullied and he learns a lesson in the end. I have to do it in a way that's like makes me want to read it or get into it, um, or have like a twist. Even in the cat story, it's like, you know, here, kitty, it's just about a cat walking through a city, or a town or whatever. That normally would bore me, but there's action to it and there's a big twist at the end. So it kind of has like an Alfred Hitchcock type of feel or a Twilight Zone type of feel to for me. So that makes it interesting to me. Um, and let's see what's the other ones. There's other ones that I'm still writing, but so you know, I wrote the title of this already, and it's called Not Hiding. And so these stories are less hiding behind like a fantasy world or a sci-fi world than I normally would do. So there's a little bit of a challenge for me, to make it interesting. But I think that limitation makes will help me um, get better, at you know parts where it's just like a normal everyday setting, and see if I can find a way to make that exciting and interesting. Um, it's crazy because I like stories where it's just mundane stuff sometimes, like even just like slice of life things. Those can be very interesting. Some people are really good at just kind of doing like a story where it's like, I don't know, a guy walking through life in a very boring, mundane way, but they make it interesting, I don't know if I could do that. To me, I have to push it. Like I totally drank the make how to make comics the Marvel way, serum or juice or Kool-Aid, as they say, you know, growing up as a kid, that makes me think I wanted to do comics even before I realized. I always think like when I was into Image Comics and stuff, like that's when I realized I wanted to be a comic artist, but it was even way before that because I remember I got how to draw how to make comics the Marvel way when I was really young. I think, I mean, I must have been in, I think I was in maybe even elementary school, but maybe middle school. I don't know. But I remember like I wouldn't have wanted to get that book if I didn't want to make comics. So I don't know. That's just a little tributary because I didn't. I'm now all of a sudden realizing that. But so um, I kind of forgot where I was at, but I think you guys get the gist. This is going like super long. I don't even know what the time is on it. Does Google Hangouts show a time? Maybe not. I guess not. But anyways, that's enough for this update. I have to do a podcast, and I missed last week's Escape Artist podcast. I didn't do one. It's been crazy for me. I've been missing, a day here and there for my 100 days of making comics as far as the videos go. I haven't missed any days as far as actually working on the comic. But some days, like yesterday, I didn't do a video because I didn't really have a lot to talk about, and I wanted to just spend time with my wife and not like, you know, have to like upload a video, especially if I didn't have much to talk about. I did my work though. I did my, comic making stuff. So, but I guess I'm going to go by the kind of rule that Mike Emmerich put up, you can miss a day maybe or whatever, but no 2 days in a row. And I don't wanna miss any days at all as far as actually making the comic, um, but if it's the video, I can let that slide a little bit, but I pretty much wanna do a video every day. Also another thought is I want to, and I came across this during the last time I was trying to do the hundreds and stuff, is I almost I like doing the videos every day, but sometimes I wonder, like, I wish I could do other kinds of videos on YouTube, more often, and because I love doing like time lapse art videos and things like that, and you know, maybe even with these do more vloggy type things, and I think that you know maybe someday I will do more vloggy type things, maybe like Gaz and Chris McQuinlan do, where they kind of collect all the week's work and then tell you what they did all week. You know, they like put all the videos together and stuff. I may do that, but I really want to do a lot of like time lapse videos. I'm very hesitant to say I'll do tutorials, but if I do tutorials eventually, it's going to be like super short and quick. Like, this is how you do this real quick. I don't want to like create an online school or anything. There's plenty of people doing all that anyways, but I don't know. But I love YouTube. I think it's so fun, so awesome, and there's so many things you can do to get more subscribers and all that. And like, not that I even, like, I do want to build it, but it's not like that's my main concern. I literally just love YouTube, and I think that it's a really cool medium, and there's like these cool things, ideas I have of what I want to do, like incorporating the art with the music that I do, and even possibly doing like some kind of animation things, like even just short stuff, but there's just a lot of cool stuff you could do, like stuff that kind of content that's never been, made before YouTube came out has come out. Like if you've ever seen stuff from like Mystery Guitar Man, or I think it's Mystery Guitar Man or something like that. And there's like a lot of other people doing really creative things. A lot of times it's like a time lapse thing or some kind of, the ones where there's people doing like visual tricks and stuff. I'm not saying I want to do all that, but I just think there's a lot you can do, and I want to explore this medium more. And I have a little bit, but I want to do more, But, I'm working on the comic. That's my main priority, and it's going to stay my main priority till it's done. And then whatever my next project is going to be. But I feel like comics will maybe be the big one, for a long time, because I just have a lot of stories I want to put out there. So we shall see. Anyways, I'm kind of blabbing now. But luckily I have the time to blab for once. It's Saturday. I do a little extra writing, do a little extra blabbing, and I need to do, like I said, I need to do a podcast. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. I kind of want to do some interviews, but I don't have a lot of time to schedule these things. And the best time, if any of my art friends or whatever wants to do a podcast with me, I'm totally open. The best time for me is, like 7 a.m. to like, I don't know, 12 or so on a Saturday morning, Eastern time. And possibly, on Sundays. I do try to get to church on Sundays. But, but even during the day, even if it's after 12, sometimes those are okay times. It depends, if my wife and I are doing stuff or not. But yeah, I mean, I can schedule it for like after work too sometimes if I really have to, but I like to spend time with my wife, after work and stuff. So that's our time together, and that's important. So, you know, but I have done podcasts and different things, during that time. I can set aside an hour or two sometimes. It's been really tough with the two jobs, but yeah, again, rambling. Oh, there's another cool thing that people have been doing that I noticed yesterday. There's like this art community, like the YouTube artist community, and they have like, I guess every 2 months or something, they have this challenge. where, there's like a group of 11 girls. I think they're all girls, and they're artists on YouTube, and they do a theme and they have like this Facebook group, and they do a theme, and everybody, like this time yesterday, I think it had to all be out on one day too, but their theme was Beautiful Nightmare, and which I thought was a really interesting theme. And so they all did like some kind of painting or whatever that had to do with that theme, and then they would sell their art or whatever. But it was just kind of a fun challenge, where you get to see a bunch of people's takes on a specific idea. And it's kind of like, and everybody's linking everybody. So I thought of that, like, that's a really cool thing. Like, I wonder if we can do something like that. Um, I mean, I'm sure maybe we could even join them, but they're kind of, I don't think they're taking submissions anymore. And I don't know. I'd love to join them, but also like maybe we can start our own. We don't have to hop on their coattails or anything. Maybe there's something we could do, that's similar. Um, I don't know. And the thing that I think is cool too is it's a theme and it can't be like fan art. So that's cool that they did that, made that a rule too. So yeah, anyways, just a thought, put it out there. Maybe you guys will think of something interesting that we could do in that realm too. Um, yeah, I guess that's it, guys. I didn't do, I skipped a few days and stuff, and I guess this is kind of to make up for that. So a little rambly, but hopefully there's some interesting things there for you guys to chew on or listen to, and maybe you can draw and listen to this one since it's a longer one. Um, and yeah, I'm gonna end it because I could keep going forever. I'm going to end it, and I really appreciate you guys watching. Again, if you want to find my stuff, marshmakesart.com, donkeyjawprojects.com. They both go to the same site. Um, I'm on Pinterest. I don't know why I always say Pinterest first. Also Tumblr. I never say Tumblr. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the social medias, Marsh Makes Art. And if you want to contribute and support in a financial way or get something cool, Store Envy. I have a store, storeenvy.com/ I think Marsh Makes Art. I think that's how the URL goes. And you can grab, one of these comics or something, or a print or whatever else I got up there if you're interested. Or also you can support on Patreon, patreon.com/Marsh Makes Art. So yeah. I really appreciate you guys' support. I really appreciate you guys watching and commenting and chatting, and it's fun. It's fun to be involved in the community. That's probably the biggest reason why I podcast, why I do YouTube videos, is I just want to be connected to all my artist buddies, and I know when I listen to people, talk or see them talk, I feel like I really get to know them. And it sucks because, like, then maybe I will contact them, but they don't know me as well, because if I'm not doing my podcast regularly or I'm not doing videos, they might, not really know me. So it's kind of weird. And it's like, I feel like I know them, but they don't know me. So I almost feel like a stalker or something, and I don't want to feel like that. So that's another reason why I think doing all these videos and stuff is cool. So you really get to know people like Scott Circle, and I always bring him up as an example, but I knew him before he started making videos through art and story and things like that. But I really got to know him when I started to watch his videos, and we've been on, podcasts or the art casters and things like that together at times. And I don't think I ever had him on my podcast, which is weird. Like, there's all these people who I always listen to their podcasts, but for some reason I haven't had them on my podcast. I have had a lot of people, but I want you guys on my podcast, everybody. I had Jeff Lafferty on, but I didn't have Kevin Cross on. I've been friends with him longer than I've been friends with almost everybody here. And but I actually did contact him. We're gonna hopefully do a podcast soon. Um, but I had like Rob Stenzinger on one time, but I never had Jersey Joe's on. I did contact him as well, and we're gonna work something out. But he's really busy. Um, there's just a lot of people. It's like I think about it, I'm surprised. I had Peter Palmiotti on like 2 or 3 times, and I'm gonna have him on again. You know, it's just weird. So, anyways, if you're interested, there is a playlist of podcasts on my YouTube. It doesn't have every Escape Artist podcast, but there is. If you look through my playlist, there's that. Dan Fraga was on. There's a bunch of other people who were on. Those are the better podcasts, because then I'm not just rambling like I am now. Um, Also, there is, but if you go to marshmakesart.com, click on podcasts, you can see all the podcasts there. There's 92 of them or 91 of them, getting close to 100. So, yeah. And there's a lot of good ones where I'm just talking too. Some are better than others. Some are more rambly or boring than others, but some are really good. Like people dig them. So yeah, I'd love to have you guys on. Hit me up if you're interested, and we'll try to schedule something. It's really hard for me to schedule something, but we'll try. um, that's about it, guys. Thank you again for watching, and I'll talk to you tomorrow, hopefully, on day 31. First month's over. Woohoo! Peace out, guys.